Marc Cohen, researcher for the International Humanitarian and Development Agency, Oxfam America. I think that World Humanitarian Day gives us the opportunity to think about the problems that the world is facing from a humanitarian perspective and the problems with the way that humanitarian assistance and protection are offered nowadays. If we look at the most recent reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, so there's a lot of need and there appears to be growing need, but the capacity of the global system to cope with this need is quite problematic. And I think we need to think about this because the need is growing, but yet at the same time, the the ability of the system that we have to cope with this is stretched to the limits. Uh, Too often, humanitarian assistance arrives too late. It's not enough, and it's the wrong kinds of things. From our perspective at Oxfam, we think there needs to be more investment in capacity at the level of affected countries and at the local level of affected communities so that the response can be faster and most likely cheaper. World Humanitarian Day offers us the occasion to think about reforming the system in this way. And this really means uh, changing how humanitarian business is done, uh, transferring resources and power from north to south, investing in disaster risk reduction and the capacity to be prepared and, in some circumstances, to prevent humanitarian emergencies before they occur. Now, obviously, there will continue to be an important role for the international community. Uh, and indeed, refugees are the responsibility of the international community. Assistance and protection of refugees who've crossed international boundaries. But we think that it's time to put leadership of humanitarian action in the hands of the affected countries, both the governments and the civil society in those countries. So governments lead, civil society plays a role in assisting in that activity, but also in holding government accountable to its responsibilities to meet humanitarian needs, to be prepared to respond to emergencies when they occur. I'm a researcher, so I'm not a classical first responder to emergencies. I'm not a hands-on protection officer, as many humanitarians work in those kinds of fields. But I think there are many important issues in humanitarian assistance and protection where researchers can play an important role. But I think more importantly, aside from being a researcher and interested in the variables and how they're related to each other, what's a cause, what's an effect, the sorts of things researchers talk about all the time. Uh, I think as a human being, we do have the notion of universal principles of human rights, international humanitarian law, and ethical concerns about our fellow human beings. There's a very well known poem by the 17th century English poet John Donne, in which he says, no man is an island, and every man's death affects me because we're talking about my fellow human beings. I think here in the 21st century, we would say no person is an island, perhaps. Uh, but the point is, we're all interconnected, and a humanitarian emergency may seem far away, but what happens in, say, Syria today has impacts on the entire world. Too often, conflicts spill over national borders. So the issues in humanitarian assistance and protection affect everyone. Boundaries are becoming uh, uh, much more open, and we see this in diseases, for example, the spread of Ebola, or in the Western Hemisphere, the chikungunya virus. It breaks out in the Caribbean, but that doesn't stop it from coming to the United States where I live. So I think, as I say, from a professional perspective, I think there are many interesting issues for me as a researcher to address, and in doing my research, I can perhaps be helpful in providing possible solutions to policy problems. But as a human being, I think we're ever more connected in the world, and it's not only compassion and concern about our fellow human beings, but increasingly, due to globalization and other factors, we're ever more interconnected. And so I think those are the factors that motivate me both personally and professionally to do this kind of work.